Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Motorsport Speak, the motorsport podcast brought to you by Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday. My name's Dan Lawrence and joining me today is Taylor Powling, and we're here to talk about Formula One Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the concluding leg of the first triple header of the 2025 F1 season. And it was an Australian ascension to the top of the F1 standings as Oscar Piastri won for the second week in a row, after a little turn one lights out scuffle with Max Verstappen and a divisive, controversial, maybe justified penalty. It depends what colours you wear on a Formula One weekend, the answer to those questions. But let's dive in. Taylor, first of all, how are you and did you enjoy the race?
Hi, Dan. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it wasn't the most thrilling race, which, perhaps not a surprise based on previous races in Jeddah. On paper, it should have all the ingredients for a cracker, high-speed street circuit, 3 DRS zones, but as the teams have discovered more downforce and more performance under this rule set, dirty has become more prominent, and that's affected the racing. And I think since the battle between Leclerc and Verstappen in 2022, over the years it's progressively got worse. And I think this is probably the worst of the bunch in terms of how important clear air was, because we even saw it, I'm sure we'll dive into this later, when Leclerc was running in P4, but as soon as he got into the lead, even on worn tyres, he was matching those behind on new tyres, just purely because he had clear air ahead of him and could dictate his pace and had no turbulence affecting his front end. So yeah, not a thrilling race, but nevertheless enough narratives for us to delve into.
Exactly, yeah. And even they went a step softer, didn't they, Pirelli, with the tyres this year, and that didn't really affect people going for the one stop. The tyres doing a quite sturdy job in terms of degradation. But yes, as you say, there were storylines, and I guess the most important one was the one which happened straight away, wasn't it? Verstappen lining up from pole, Piastri alongside him. The first time we've seen these two come together, I would say, and Piastri came out on top. Really good launch, actually, as well. And then sort of had the initiative going into the inside of turn one. Verstappen, up to his maybe wily old tricks, didn't he? Let off the brake a little bit, and they both went deep into turn one. Piastri taking charge of the corner. Verstappen going onto the runoff and into the lead, which the stewards didn't like. 5-second penalty, which basically cost him the win because he only lost out by 2.6 seconds. I think the majority of people, myself included, probably on the Piastri side of this argument. Would that be your assessment of the situation, despite Verstappen and Red Bull's, I guess, anger and protest?
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw it, I was instantly thinking, well, Verstappen's got to be penalised here and either give up the position or, if he doesn't, get the penalty, which he duly did. But then, although I'm still on that side of the fence, you look at it and Max might have an argument in terms of, you watch Piastri's onboard and also from Russell's onboard from behind, and you see how deep Piastri goes on the brakes and how deep into the corner he goes. Verstappen didn't, even if Verstappen would have, had the speed to make the corner, I think he would have been forced out wide anyway. So I think that's predominantly where Red Bull's argument comes from, is that, he was pushed off regardless. But as you say, I think this was classic Verstappen being wily, and he's trying to utilise the rulebook to his advantage, because the rulebook does say whoever's ahead at the apex, has the entitlement to that corner. So I think Verstappen did his usual trick of, carrying more speed into the corner to get that high ground, and then, can be argued later. And on this occasion, unfortunately for Red Bull, it didn't quite work out like that. But yeah, I think it's a really tough one because of the way the rulebook's written and the interpretations. Because at first glance, you look at it and it looks like a slam dunk Verstappen penalty. Piastri's down his inside, got the high ground. Verstappen was cut across turn two, kept the position. Piastri stayed on the track. It does look quite simple, but then when you slow it down and factor in how the rulebook's written, it does add another layer of complexity. And I don't really see how you get around that without one party being dissatisfied.
Yeah, I think it's just the nature of racing, isn't it? No two incidents are the same. Although you could argue that maybe there's obviously been talk, hasn't there? I mean, Jonathan Wheatley, Sauber team principal, ex-Red Bull sporting director among them, drawing a comparison to Turn 12 at Austin last year, where it's Verstappen in the other sort of side of that situation, wasn't he? He was on the inside of turn 12 with Norris challenging him. He took Norris wide to that corner and Norris passed on the runoff, and then he was the one who got penalised. So I guess there was a precedent set there. Yes, we've seen it countless times, haven't we? Verstappen on the inside of a corner and he goes, you know what, I'm going to keep as much of this asphalt to myself as possible, maybe not turn quite as much as I need to. But that's racing, and I think that makes it quite exciting, wasn't it? There was a bit of drama right at the start, and I think very telling that Piastri came out on top in that first confrontation with Max, whereas I think we saw several situations last year with Lando and Max where Norris maybe didn't get the upper hand, which I guess we could talk a little bit more about that. But just Piastri's general handling of that race, I thought was quite impressive. The pit stop window again being crucial, him coming out behind Hamilton and clearing him with that incredible DRS maneuver in the second DRS zone around the outside. That was brave and really important, I think, to give himself a buffer when Verstappen eventually pit and came out behind the Ferrari driver, and then managed the gap. It did come down at the end, didn't it, to 2.6 seconds, but I think traffic was a bit of a mitigating circumstance there, and fastest lap at the end. The first championship leader from Australia since his manager Mark Webber in 2010. It's all looking quite good for Oscar, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. He headed into the weekend with the momentum after that win in Bahrain, and I think everyone, factor in that and Norris's struggles, tipped Piastri to replicate that in last weekend in Saudi Arabia, and he duly did. He's got the momentum now, and he's got the points lead, with two important things on his side heading into Miami and then the European season. And yeah, first Australian points leader, as you say, since Mark Webber in 2010. I'm sure Mark will, be leaning on his experience to help Oscar through, because he didn't quite get the job done. It's kind of similar circumstances, really, two warring teammates. I'm sure once Norris gets his act together, we're probably going to see some flashpoints between the two of them, because there's only so long you can go as teammates battling for the championship and not having a collision. So that'll be very exciting to see. And I think we saw signs this weekend that Norris is slowly getting to grips with that McLaren a bit more. It still bites him, as we saw in qualifying, which we'll get on to. But it actually seemed like Norris had the upper hand on Piastri last weekend. But once again, it was Piastri that, made it count and got the points on the board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's get on to that now. It's a crucial sort of moment, wasn't it, of the weekend? And similar, even in Bahrain, Norris maybe wasn't the best McLaren driver throughout the majority of the weekend leading up to qualifying, but he made those errors in Q3, didn't he? And wound up sixth. Piastri wound up on pole, took the win in Bahrain, and then in qualifying, Norris had, as you say, I think was the faster McLaren in practice. Q2, it just got to that crunch moment again, and this bit where you need to get that extra percent out of the car, where Norris really struggles, and he struggled hard because he ended up in the barriers, didn't he? And not setting a time in Q3 and starting in 10th and just giving himself all that work to do, wasn't able to get onto the podium this time around, with Leclerc just holding on to third. You could argue that those, I think it was 3 laps wasted trying to get past Lewis Hamilton in the first phase of the race for Norris, with the DRS sort of bait and switch between the final corner and down into turn 1, where Hamilton, was getting that DRS back and just passing Norris straight away as Norris was trying to get past him. That could have cost Norris a podium, those wasted laps. And he said he's giving himself all the work to do, and he's making his life harder for himself. He needs to sort out this qualifying, doesn't he? Because he's 10 points behind Piastri now. We don't know whether the front wing flexi technical directive in Spain is going to erode the advantage that McLaren has over the competitors. So he's kind of got between now and Spain, I feel, to sort of sort himself out on Saturday so that he can start challenging Oscar before he mounts too much of a points lead.
Yeah, as I said, it's all about momentum, really. And I think it's that psychological thing. Not that the more Norris makes mistakes, and how open he is when he's speaking to the media, he wears his heart on his sleeve. Although, that should be commended in some aspects, as Sebastian Vettel pointed out over the weekend. I think for someone like Piastri, who's more calm, cool and collected, he'll be thriving on that every time Norris is berating himself. It's just feeding into Piastri's energy and, building that gap between them. It's almost like he needs, because the speed's unquestioned. We all know what Norris can do. And you'd have to say, on the balance of their time as teammates, he's had that edge on raw speed. But for whatever reason, he's not able to extract it with his car. It's as if he needs to start. He's trying to drive 100% because that's how drivers are dialed in to do in Q3. But it's almost as if we're seeing through practice and through Q1 and Q2, when he's driving at 98, 99%, the pace is there. His pace is good enough. It's when he's trying to go to 100% with his car, it's just not clicking. I think if he had qualified third or fourth last weekend, he would have still had a shot of a win, and he would have at least been on the podium. It's that risk versus reward. I think, obviously, in a direct championship battle with his teammate, he's going to want to out-qualify Oscar and go on and win races. But it's just weighing up that long game. And he's also got not just factor in the threat from his teammate, he's also lost more points to Verstappen again. Verstappen's still loitering there, not that far behind. I think it's only 3 points between Norris and Verstappen now. And as you mentioned, this technical directive in Spain flips the balance of power, brings McLaren close to the opposition, and suddenly Red Bull have got a car that is even a tenth slower than the McLaren. Verstappen's going to be right on them, and Norris hasn't capitalised and built up that points advantage that he perhaps should have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at Verstappen, 87 points, Norris 89, Piastri 99. Piastri showing that cool sort of exterior. Like, he's such a cool character, isn't he? But I think that's probably what's playing into his advantage at the moment. And Verstappen's keeping his hand in, even though at some tracks the Red Bull's way off the pace. I mean, we saw that in Bahrain, but in Suzuka and Jeddah, when the car comes back to them slightly, Max is challenging for wins, if not getting them. So, as you say, I think Norris has got to step it up, hasn't he? And another team sort of leveling up in Saudi was Ferrari, especially on one side of the garage, with Leclerc getting that podium, his first of the season. And we were talking through the race, sort of debating whether he could hold on, and he did, which is obviously a really encouraging sign for Ferrari and Leclerc. Really impressive drive by him again, and he was impressive in qualifying, getting as much as he could out of the SF25. I guess a good sign for Ferrari, but they've still got quite a way to go, and especially on Hamilton's side of the garage, who was just completely despondent again. We've had that high in Shanghai sprint, but since then it's been quite torrid for Lewis, and I think just sort of, I think he was seventh in qualifying, and in the race seventh again, sort of with Yuki Tsunoda's lap one crash, basically last of the top teams. It's not looking good on that side of the garage, but a little bit more positive with Leclerc.
Yeah, it was definitely a tale of two halves in the Ferrari garage on Leclerc. I mean, I'd go as far as to say it was a 10 out of 10 weekend, purely because he was absolutely flawless. He qualified fourth, that was the maximum in the car, and then he brought him a podium, which even he said was unexpected. The way he executed that extended first in, I think it's 29 laps on the medium tyre. I think that's one of his most underrated assets now. Is when he came into the sport, he was renowned as a one lap specialist, but I think over time, kind of studying Sebastian Vettel helped him as well in that regard. He's worked really hard on his time management, and now he's one of the best up there. And I think along with Verstappen, they're two drivers that they can drive to a really quick pace without taking much life out of the tyres. We have drivers like Perez, renowned for being good on the tyres, but they can't do it at that leading pace. And what we've seen with Verstappen and Leclerc now, especially, they can both do that to an expert degree. And the reason I give it a 10 out of 10 for Leclerc, quick hint for our driver ratings that we get up on the site, is that not only did he execute a flawless weekend, it's the gaps he put on Hamilton, over 5/10 in qualifying, almost 31 seconds in the race, or irrespective of Hamilton's struggles, to thrash your teammate in that fashion. That is, absolutely flawless weekend from Leclerc, and that's a morale boost to Ferrari. But as he pointed out, post-race, he's already 52 points behind Piastri in a season where he came into it expected to be in title contention. Although this is a step in the right direction, you can only give away so many rounds before the championship pitch is completely closed off for this year for Ferrari. So he'll be really hoping that those upgrades that they'll have come in and the technical director as well, can put Ferrari on a level pegging with McLaren. And I think Saudi's a bit of a anomaly in terms of the asphalt smooth. That obviously helped Red Bull. They didn't suffer with the same degradation as in Bahrain. So it's hard to draw too many conclusions, but it looks like in the race, just from that second stint in Bahrain and here in Saudi, that Ferrari, their race car, is competitive. It's just, as Leclerc said, in qualifying for whatever reason, like last year, they can't extract the same grip as the other three leading teams, and that puts them on the back foot, because although they've got maybe a slight edge on Red Bull and Mercedes in race trim, it's too minimal to, make much of a difference. So they need that grip position. So it's going to be interesting to see whether there's an inherent issue with the car that, won't be solved pretty much like last year, carried all the way through, because that's going to definitely hamstring their title prospects. Hamilton, honestly, if you watch his driving and all his interviews, you could have honestly told me it was a 2024 Hamilton weekend in red, and that's how it felt. He was very downbeat. We know he wears it like Lando. He wears his heart on his sleeve. So what he does post race can be taken with a pinch of salt, because when things have calmed down, I imagine he's not thinking it's going to be a painful season for the entirety of it. We have seen that spark in Shanghai, but since then, Leclerc's found a breakthrough in Japan with the car and has just had the upper hand. And it's what we all expected, I think, going in. None of us expected, someone operating at Leclerc's level in 2024, who's accustomed to the team, Hamilton, to come in and instantly start beating him. But it is concerning that he's already kind of having these dips in both performance and I think morale as well.
Yeah, I'd say that last point, just it is concerning to see the dip in the morale and the similarities to last year in terms of how things went with Mercedes. And it almost feels to me as if it's so important that he gets on with the next generation of F1 car coming in 2026. Otherwise, because this whole period really since 2022 has been a difficult one for Hamilton. It seems like he's never been able to reach his previous heights in this era of regulation. And for Leclerc and Ferrari, as you say, with the title, it almost feels reminiscent of McLaren's issue last year, is that they came good, but they came good too late. And that was why Verstappen was able to hold on to the driver's title. And you can almost see the similar thing happening with Leclerc, even if they do catch up with upgrades with the technical directive. Will McLaren have amassed too many points by that point in time? And then another telling point, obviously with the qualifying with Ferrari, he's not just got to contend with the fact that their one lap pace is poor, but it's the fact that there's multiple teams on one lap. It's Mercedes and Red Bull, it's Verstappen and Russell that can pit Leclerc in qualifying, because they're getting a lot out of their cars over one lap. Unfortunately for Russell, though, and Mercedes, they had Russell starting from third on the grid, but he slipped down to fifth, Antonelli sixth at the end of the race, really struggling with the tyres at the end of the race. Their pace didn't seem to follow them from Bahrain in terms of managing the tyres, did it?
No, and as Russell said post-race, it was kind of a complete opposite of what they're expecting. They were expecting Bahrain maybe to be a bit tougher, just because of their weakness last year with degradation and overheating, and Saudi with its smoother surface to be beneficial to them. It didn't transpire that way, whereas they had the validation in Bahrain. They've now got another problem that's propped up maybe the first kind of sign of weakness in the Mercedes camp this year, because it's all been pretty plain sailing with the W16, but then this really caught them out. Came as a complete surprise to the entire team, as Toto Wolff said post-race. Russell looked really good for even a shot at the win, I think. Qualified a 10th off pole. It was only, I think, overheating in the last sector that actually, cost him that 10th that he had to Verstappen and Piastri. But it's still, based on how they've been in the races this year, and especially in Bahrain, that he'd be able to cling on to the tails of Verstappen and Piastri in the race. But although that was kind of the case in the first stint, he did slip back a little bit, but nothing like the second stint. It was an alarming drop-off. Just struggled with front and rear blistering on the tyres. He was powerless to keep Leclerc and Norris behind, and just eventually, I think, settled into a distant fifth place. Which, if last year a fifth place for Mercedes isn't a bad result, but considering the highs that Russell's hit this year, it was a very disappointing weekend and very much back to the drawing board before Miami. And also, Miami's going to be a warm race. We're going to have these European races that will be warm as well. Will it still be an Achilles heel for Mercedes?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess what's tricky for them is that they've had these two polarizing races, isn't it? In warm conditions, I guess maybe Miami, you say, being warm. If it swings one way or the other, they're going to find out what their troubles are going to be moving forward. Yes, it's very interesting, isn't it, really? McLaren have that advantage. Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, they've all got their separate issues. And it's I guess, it's playing into the papaya team's hands in terms of both championships. Moving into the midfield, it was a very, very strong weekend for Williams, particularly on Carlos Sainz's side of the garage, leading the charge, his first weekend doing so, really, for Williams. That remarkable performance in qualifying to be sixth, Albon just missing out on getting into Q3. And then both of them getting a really strong result in 8th and 9th, double points finish, helped a little bit by Tsunoda and Gasly coming together on lap 1. And really timely, I guess, for Williams as well. Their tally's up to 25 points. They're 5th in the standings, just as James Vowles has declared. That's it. We're not developing the 2025 car anymore. We're stacking all our chips on 2026, which is no real surprise. Vowles has been banging on about that sort of thing for quite a while. So, yeah, really good weekend for Williams to get some strong points on the board, for Sainz to look really settled for the first time. And just in time for them to focus on making their 2026 car as good as it can be.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was going to bring up. It's, it kind of vindicates their decision. Not that it wasn't going to be vindicated, because they're never going to match challenge the top 4 teams in race trim under this regulation cycle. So it makes sense for them to go all in on 2026. But this double points finish, I think it's their first two cars in the top 10 across the line. Obviously, Sainz got 10th place for his qualifications in China, but this result really vindicates that decision, because they have got, you have to say, on the balance of the 5 races, the 5th quickest car in the field. I think that's not a debate. It was only a case of Haas were above them in the championship before this round, because by virtue of the American team executed results better. I think James Vowles even alluded to that. But yeah, this was a very well executed race. Sainz showed glimmer in Bahrain that he was starting to gel with his car a bit more, and then that was consolidated this weekend. He got the qualifying result in again, 6th place, beat Hamilton on the grid. Learned his lesson from Bahrain, didn't fight Hamilton and Norris too hard and risk damage or losing time that in a fight that he was never going to win. And yeah, this time he got the result to show for it, unlike Bahrain, and he had his teammate backing him up. He said post-race it reminded him of Singapore 2023, where he was given Albon DRS to defend from the racing balls of Isaac Hadjar. Bit of, there are some similarities to it, but on this occasion it was the team telling him to do that rather than himself taking the initiative to do it. But he still executed it very, very well, and that's sort of tactical nous we've come to expect from a driver like Carlos Sainz. And he's showing why Williams was so desperate to bring him in, the value of having 2 equally matched drivers, which they've not really had over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's safe to say that Albon has taken up another level, hasn't he, this year, with Sainz in the Williams team with him. And yeah, that DRS management they did to keep Hadjar at bay in 10th place was impressive. The way they spoke about it post-race, you've got to be really excited, I think, if you're a Williams fan, knowing that these are the drivers they've got in place. It's working now, and they're really stacking all their chips on 2026. It could be if they get it right for next year, it could be a really exciting time.
And the Mercedes engine as well, which we're all expecting to be the class-leading power unit, if rumours are to be believed.
Yeah, and you look at the standings as well. Their decision to turn off development on 2025, they're on 25 points. You've got Sauber at the bottom of the table on 6 points. We're not expecting them to be racking up that many more points across the rest of the season. Aston Martin on 10 points. They've been speaking about points being hard to come by. So you could look even in 2025, they could at least get 8th. And you're looking at Racing Bulls. They're only on 8 points so far. They're finding it hard to come by points with even one car, let alone both. So Williams could still have quite a strong year. And if other teams fail to develop beyond them, there's no really saying that they're going to struggle to get more and more points as the year goes on. So it's looking like a strong 2025 and potentially an even stronger 2026. Yes, I mentioned Hadjar there in the Racing Bulls, rounding out the points paying positions in 10th. having the better of Liam Lawson for the third straight weekend on the New Zealanders' sort of return to the Faenza team after his sort of ill-fated stint at Red Bull. I think it's important, really, for Lawson. I think this is probably the main talking point, isn't it, really, from Racing Bulls? It's really important he now gets this triple header out, back of his mind, and he really needs to get on the front foot, I think, in Miami. Because if Hadjar beats him across this course of a season, it doesn't look good for Lawson's F1 career long term, does it?
No, especially with a certain Arvid Lindblad becoming the youngest F2 race winner on the same weekend. I mean, his weekend wasn't as bad as it looked. I think he outqualified Hadjar, and without the 10-second penalty he got, he only finished 1.3 seconds behind. So, they were on different strategies as well. So it wasn't a direct comparison. But yeah, as you say, I think although Hadjar has been impressive in his short stint in F1 to date, when you look at what Tsunoda was doing to Hadjar, I think, not necessarily Racing Bulls, but the Red Bull management will be wanting to see Lawson stamping that same authority, especially on a rookie, no matter how quick Hadjar is. So yeah, hopefully for him, now he's got this triple header out of the way, he's had 3 rounds to kind of understand the Racing Bulls car a bit more. He can come back, and I think for him, if he can get that points duck broken this year, of just a mental boost, and then he can build from that. But yeah, he certainly just needs to settle down now and really show some strong runner results, because it is, with Lindblad in the pipeline and the way Red Bull, especially Horner and Marcus, spoken about him. If Lawson's continuing to trail behind Hadjar on a regular basis, I don't think it would take them long to make that swap going into 2026, even with new regulations on the horizon where you might want an experienced hand at the wheel.
Exactly, yeah. Hopefully, as you say, Bahrain circumstances maybe playing against Lawson. That was perhaps the sign that he is starting to turn the corner that he needs to. Hadjar finished ahead of Fernando Alonso, 11th, his second 11th place result in 3 races. I'm sort of basically saying that that's the best Aston Martin can do at the moment. Stroll out in Q1, taking an unfortunate record of the most Q1 exits in F1. The Aston Martin team kind of in crisis, you could say, a little bit. They not really, there was still the talk of development learnings last year, wasn't it, as they routinely slipped down the pecking order. It doesn't look like they've learned much from those troubles, because they kind of picked up where they left off in 2024. And Alonso seems to think it's going to be difficult for them to pick up points for the rest of the season. So it's I guess, similar to the Williams situation in the sense of, obviously, they're focusing a lot on 2026. Adrian Newey's only working on 2026. But the problem for Aston Martin, unlike Williams, is that currently 2025 isn't going very well at all.
No, and I think Fernando would be wishing that the calendar's the same length as when he was winning world titles to put him through less rounds of misery. But instead, he's got another 19 rounds, which, back in his day would have been an entire season. But he's already done 5 rounds. He's got another 19 to go with this car. And I really can't see him, with upgraded their fortunes, changing that much. They were hopeful of it being a bit better in Saudi without, with the emphasis on high speed. And it was to a degree, but the car's not competitive. And it shouldn't be a surprise. It's a Dan Fallows led car, the man they let go at the end of last year. The man they brought into the technical department, Adrian Newey's focused on 2026. They're kind of at a crossroads at the moment, so it shouldn't be any grave surprise that they're struggling so much. But still, it's when you've got a brand like Aston Martin in F1 struggling to get points, that's going to make headlines.
Exactly, yeah, and with a driver like Fernando Alonso as well. But I guess if things work and pan out for 2026, he's not going to worry too much. He's had a long F1 career, so I think he can chalk off 1 year and maybe cast it out of his memory, hopefully. But knowing Alonso in his career, there's a few years he actually has to do that with, isn't there?
More like a stretch than a...
yes.
Yeah.
2013, yeah. Haas, I think they expected to have a difficult weekend, didn't they, really? Given their sort of high-speed cornering isn't really up to snuff. So no points for them again, which was, I guess, yeah, to be expected. I think they're going to have their season's going to be very up and down, isn't it?
Yeah, I was about to say that it's going to ebb and it's going to be one extreme to the other until they can get. Obviously, they brought that floor upgrade to help with the high speed issues and the bouncing. But Komatsu, the team boss, always said that was a temporary fix until they bring a more permanent solution. As I said, I think they're going to ebb and flow, and it actually seems. I mean, one talking point from Haas, I guess, is that Ollie Behrman does seem to have the upper hand over Esteban Ocon. The point table doesn't suggest that, but Ocon's, he's been very Jekyll and Hyde, much like the Haas car, really. When the car's competitive, like he showed in Shanghai, he's right up there. But when it's struggling, he does seem to struggle a lot out in Q1 again. Although his place at Haas isn't going to be under threat because he's got a 2-year deal, he could very quickly kind of find himself in the Magnussen mold where you're just kind of petering along, not disastrous pace enough to be like, oh, this you should be out of F1, but he's just kind of going through the motions, and all it takes is like a enticing option to come available on the market, and it's like it was when Ocon ironically came onto the market and Behrman, that he could find himself out. So it's not a crisis point for Ocon because he still has his leading point scorer and seeding a driver, and he's 5 rounds into his tenure with the team. But yeah, I think it's something to watch out. I think that's quite exciting. I mean, it was one before the season that I had my eye on, but even more so now is how Ocon and Behrman stack up against each other, especially with the reputation that Behrman has.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and Behrman, I think, is living up to that reputation, isn't he? Really, he's making a really strong start, and I think Ocon's finding that he's got a challenge on his hands with Behrman, who I think is appearing to be, worthy of the hype. He's got the speed, and obviously embedded in the team through last season, through practice sessions, testing sessions. Obviously, being part of the Ferrari Academy program, I think, really helps be in Behrman's favour. It's almost like he's. I mean, it's too early to say, but it feels like he's on that similar trajectory that Charles Leclerc was on, in terms of he came into F1 as a Ferrari prospect, installed into a team that Ferrari supplied mechanically in Alfa Romeo, Sauber at the time. And then he went on to join the Scuderia after a strong start to Formula One and really embed himself there. You think maybe with Hamilton's troubles, if they continue forever, whatever the length of this deal is, and Behrman continues to improve at Haas, there's a very natural successor, isn't there, to a Ferrari seat, which is exciting, I think, for English and British Formula One fans long term. Yes, leaves us 2 teams to talk about with, I guess, underwhelming weekends. Alpine showing a lot of promise again. I mean, Gasly was incredible in Bahrain and again in Q3 in Saudi Arabia, but his race only lasted a matter of 4 corners because of that racing incident with Tsunoda where they touched wheels and both span out. Unfortunately for Alpine at the moment, if Gasly's not in the race, Jack Doohan's not quite there yet to be able to do the job for Alpine, and he sort of faded into obscurity, didn't he? Really, in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, so no points for them again. Still stuck on 6 scored for the season when they really want to be where Williams are on 25, and probably the pace of the car warrants to have a few more points as well.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that argument of this is why Williams have 2. If you were to rank drivers on the grid, I think you could probably make an argument to say Sainz and Albon are in that kind of 6 to 10 range, not quite the elite level, as we've seen by their teammate records against the likes of Verstappen and Leclerc, but very, very good Grand Prix drivers, and for a midfield team, very top tier. Alpine have got that in Gasly, you'd have to say, judging by what he's been able to achieve in the midfield, but it does look like a one-man show at the moment. Doing some sporadic promise. And I kind of noticed a similar trend, and I don't know if to do with time management or whatnot, but it happened in Suzuka as well. And I guess Suzuka and Saudi Arabia were actually kind of 2 similar races because they were flat out pushes from start to finish, really. But he just seemed to just drop, his pace drops throughout the race rather than getting better. He seems not massively competitive, but a respectable competitive level in the early stints. And then it just seems to, him being overtaken was actually one of the main action points through that second stint. So yeah, he's being given the time by Alpine, but is there enough promise there to suggest that he's the long-term incumbent of that seat? I don't know if I see it at the moment.
Yeah, I know it's tricky, isn't it? And then, as you say, I think you made a great case of Williams there with Sainz, and probably part of the reason why Alpine tried to scupper that Williams-Sainz arrangement last year, which coincidentally also scuppered our reporting at the time. That's a different story. Finally, Sauber. I think, again, slowest car on the grid. It's going to be that way, I think, at potentially a lot of the circuits. And really, I think the main highlight for them in Jeddah was Gabriel Bortoleto almost side-swiping his manager Alonso into the outside wall into turn one. Other than that, not really a lot to write home about for the Himmel-based outfit, really.
No, it's a good job that Hulkenberg, with his experience and prowess in wet weather conditions, capitalise on that race in Australia, because otherwise it could have been a case. It looks like it could be a case of last year where they go so long without a points finish. So at least they have that on the board, but it's not been enough. As I think I might have said after the Australia race, I don't think it would be enough for them to avoid propping up last in the Constructors' Championship, and that's where they stand. There's only to say that it's not a great car. I don't think anyone expected it to be a great car. Their attention's on Audi in 2026. So I think, personally for Audi, from a company point of view, they're not going to really care how Sauber do, because it's not their name attached to it. They'd rather, I think, sacrifice even just a couple of places in the championship this year to make sure they're respectable position in 2026.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at least for them, they've got their pieces in place now, haven't they? Bonotto's been there for quite a while. In terms of, I guess, the cutthroat nature of F1, he's been there for a while. Jonathan Wheatley's down there as team principal. Hulkenberg is this really safe pair of hands they've got locked in long term, and they've got Bortoleto locked in long term as well, who's shown promise. So it's not all doom and gloom. And yeah, they're one of those several teams, aren't they, who have got their eye on 2026, along with Aston Martin and Williams. And you could argue that Ferrari should maybe have one eye on 2026, given the way their season started. Yes, and now we get a little break until Miami, where I guess McLaren will probably be on top once again, returning to the venue of Norris's first victory, which could potentially give him some impetus to challenge Oscar Piastri. A sprint weekend as well. How do you see it playing out in?
Oh, it's a tough one, because Miami's a bit of, it's a sprint weekend, so only one practice session. So I imagine a lot of teams will avoid bringing upgrades. Most of them have been touting that Imola could be the destination of when they bring their vaster packages, but especially Red Bull. We get to see what McLaren have in the pipeline. Ferrari brought a few bits so far. It's going to be about who nails the set. Well, obviously with the sprint rules nowadays, apart from they've reopened, but it is going to be about who nails the setup on the weekend. You'd have to give the edge to McLaren, especially if, as we expect, it's going to be warm temperatures. Their strength with preserving the tyres, especially the rear ones, it should come into play in race trim. And last year, Norris did look the standout McLaren driver, but that was with a very different car in terms of characteristics and behaviour. So I think it's very important, though, for Norris to iron out these mistakes he's been making. And with 2 races, he's got 2 chances to take points out of Piastri's lead. Even if they come home first and second in the sprint, it's only 1 point. It's still a point gained back that he wouldn't be able to get on another weekend. So although it's not urgent that Norris wins in Miami, it's not he has to win. Like perhaps we were talking about the end of last year when he was chasing down Verstappen, where he needed wins. I think it's important for him to, as I said earlier, to stem Piastri's momentum and kind of just put his front foot forward again and show that actually he's still the McLaren to beat, because that is exactly what he said actually post race Sunday. He still believes he's the quickest driver out there, or the driver to beat. It's just about putting all those ingredients together and actually executing weekends better in the same manner that his teammate has.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, isn't it, with McLaren? They've got these 2 number 1 drivers, and Piastri's gaining sort of, speed, maturity, and maybe sort of prevalence within that team. Is there, it could be a potential flashpoint weekend, couldn't it, to really settle where this dynamic of McLaren, is it really shifting in Oscar's favour? And given his rapid rate of progression, obviously Miami wasn't a great one for him last year, but given the way he's improved year on year, he might turn up in Miami and be absolutely fine. So it's going to be a really interesting weekend, particularly between those two, as the 25 championship unfolds further. But I think that's a good place to wrap it up as we sort of take a breather after 3 back-to-back races. So Taylor, thank you for joining me. Listeners, thank you for joining us. Watchers, thank you for joining us. Make sure to like and subscribe, and catch Motorsport Speak wherever you deem fit, and keep an eye on Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday, and follow us on socials at Motorsport Week on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. We're there. But for now, goodbye.